All right. Jared and Steven here, coming back to do our second podcast. We talked so much about the Marvel Cinematic Universe in our DC podcast that we figured we should probably go ahead and do an Avengers Infinity War podcast. So, Steven, good to have you again.
Thank you. Good to be here. We had so much fun just destroying, I believe was the word that we used to get attention. Which, to be
Clickbait.
fair,
Yeah.
I think it worked. We got some views on it. Yeah. So no, yeah, you're absolutely right. I can't help but compare one to the other, and so we might as well. It's the topic of the moment, so might as well bring it up.
Yeah. All right, so I guess we'll just go through kind of the usual process here. We kind of talked about this a little bit beforehand about doing first impressions, spoilers, theories, takeaways, that type of thing. So I guess for this one, we'll stay inside the box and just kind of go through that. But I'm going to get off on rabbit trails, so feel free to get off on rabbit trails too.
All right.
But yeah, so starting out. First impressions, obviously this was, I would say this and Star Wars, this and The Force Awakens, but also maybe the, the Phantom Menace. Maybe those three are probably the three movies that I can think of that have been most hyped. There was so much anticipation for them. I'm sure there's others that I'm not thinking of, but obviously Star Wars is a little bit different because they've had these decades-long layoffs in between the new trilogies. Avengers, the Marvel Cinematic Universe, it's a little bit different, where we've had 10 years of build-up to this film, but just tremendous anticipation for this movie. So going in, what were you looking for, and what did you come away thinking?
Yeah. I think that there was a certain fair amount of hype with this film. I do remember. Yeah, I think I share some of those titles with you in terms of comparison. Although I would find it, like you said, because of the time off, a little different with Star Wars. That absence kind of created that hype once things were announced, and the fact that they've been doing they've only been making more Marvel movies per year.
Right.
They started off with one, and now they average like 3 a year, I think now. Mm-hmm. I will say, I think probably the most recent thing I could compare it to is maybe Age of Ultron in terms of its hype. Pre-seeing the movie. And I think that was where part of it diverged, is that one of the most common criticisms I heard about Ultron was that they really spoiled too much of the movie in the trailers. And I didn't get that at all from Infinity War. And I think I watched a lot. A lot of the trailers. I don't think I saw all of them, but saw a lot of them. So yeah, I was definitely up for this. Because this is not just really, the hype for Infinity War is every movie that came before it, besides just the trailer. So they did so much groundwork. So,
and basically having every character in every one of those movies. Not quite, but almost coming into this movie.
Yeah. And so, I was definitely keyed up for it. I saw it. I saw it the Friday morning that it released. Saw it before lunchtime that day. And it was just, first of all, if I can just pause real quick, I can't imagine anybody watching this who probably hasn't already seen it, because you either don't really want to be spoiled by it, or you want to know what other people think and tell them that their theories are wrong and that yours are right or whatever. And I would really recommend, if it's an option for you, to see it at least twice. Once to sustain the emotional impact of the movie, and then the second to actually get to go back and enjoy it. I was kind of conflicted when I came out the first time, because I was so impacted by the choices they made, for some of the stuff, and like I knew going in, I'm like, all right, this is gonna be heavy. I had a vague concept of what the source material was for this. I have some friends here that are a lot more comically educated, comic bookly educated than I am. So they, we've talked about, the actual storylines are, and obviously Marvel Cinematic Universe will deviate from that sometime because they don't always have rights to every character, or some things just don't make sense in a movie that they do in a comic book. And so, I had a decent idea, I thought, of what I would be seeing, and it just it really exceeded my expectations. And on almost every level, I would say, and I don't say that to um, overly praise the movie. It was just such an impressive thing to go and watch.
Hmm.
Um, it was just impactful and on a lot of different levels, and so yeah, it's actually good. Jared, you and I have talked about it right after we had seen it the first time, and we made our little rankings comparison of where it falls in the MCU. And I don't think I was very generous to it at the front, and a lot of that is because this very much is kind of a going to probably prove to be a part one
Right.
movie, and I just anticipated that upon repeat viewings I would like it less, but I actually liked it more the second time because I wasn't like white knuckling it the whole time, like just wondering like who is going to die next, like kind of thing. So once that emotional impact is kind of put to the side, and you can actually like enjoy the moments of levity that are there because you won't be afraid of when it's going to get intense again. I enjoyed it a lot, and really just, if nothing else, I think the biggest um, compliment for me for it is just how much respect I give to that whole studio for being able to pull this off. Like, you and I, we were big into the Matrix trilogy
Hmm.
at the time when it came out, and I still think about that sometimes. Like sometimes it's like a JFK theory. I'm like, where did it all go wrong? Like could we go back and just redeem that? And
Yeah.
so
Probably
um
right. Probably right about where the Wachowskis started to insert like their S&M fantasies would be where I would
yeah,
point to it going
somewhere
wrong.
somewhere around the Merovingian, I think.
Right.
um the there was a character change in that movie of the Oracle because she passed away,
Hmm.
and they were forced to recast her. And I didn't think about it that much because I didn't really know what they were going to try to pull off with Infinity War, even though knowing eventually a few years before it happened that that's where they were going, because they would announce their slate of films a couple of years ahead of time. But I'm sitting here thinking like, once all the dust settled on this, no pun intended, that, wow, like they did a couple, like every like cast, um audible they had to call with like recasting people was always a step up.
Hmm.
um every like source material thing they had to modify. I mean, for me, like it was, I was either indifferent about it or thought it was an improvement. Like I don't know that anything that they were forced to do that maybe wouldn't have fit their original vision brought down the franchise in any way.
Right.
And to do that over a 10-year period with this like long-term plan and to really be able to pull it off is just crazy. Like
It
that
is.
shouldn't be able to work. Like not even with Disney owning it. Like
Right.
too many variables. So I'm just kind of just so impressed that they're able to do that.
Yeah. I mean, I think anybody who's made even a short film, like the first time you make a short film, it's amazing how many things there are that can go wrong in something that lasts 3 minutes, you know?
Yeah.
And for what they've done, I mean, yeah, people can complain about Disney taking over everything and can talk about the Marvel movies being sort of fluff entertainment to a certain extent, but it really is impressive if you look at it just from a very clinical point of view of how they've been able to maintain a cohesive story, maintain tone, and have it be successful. I mean, if that's not your type of movie, then that's not your type of movie.
Right.
But for people who do enjoy the comic book movies, there have been very few missteps. Maybe Thor: The Dark World or something like that. But apart from that, you know, just very few missteps with it. It's like sorcery. It really is like Disney made a pact with some sort of alternate dimension demon that allows them to craft this and you know, not really have any hiccups in it.
Yeah. I mean, it's just from a technical standpoint, it's such. I was going to say such a marvel. I'm really not going to try to make too many puns and intentionally here that sometimes they just slip out. But yeah, like it just to be able to pull that off. And you know what? If you've even read like some of like the clickbaity articles about here are the massive plot holes in the MCU, like they're so weak. Like, yeah, things exist, but I'm like, okay, I don't really care if Guardians of the Galaxy said Gamora was the last survivor of her planet, and then we find out that half of her planet actually survived. Like, what bearing does that have on the overall story? Like, clearly, one director directed one film and another director directed another. Like,
Yeah.
okay, you got me. Let's throw the whole thing in the trash now.
Right.
Like, I don't know, but it's just, yeah.
So what would you rate this? What's your, I don't know what your rating system is, but what would you rate Infinity War?
I change my rating systems all the time. I really need to discipline myself to that. Well, I'm a wrestling fan, so let's give it the old 5-star scale. I think I'd give it a minimum 4. I think I'm very stingy on perfect scores for things because, well, I am. But yeah, I would say 4. You know, and seeing how waiting a year from now to see how the conclusion of this wraps everything up may even boost it up a little bit better, or could knock it down depending on how they do it. But right now, I think I'll rest at 4. What about you?
Yeah, I mean, I think I prefer the 10-point scale to where you can get down a little more detailed and give something an 8.5 or whatever. I think I would probably give it, on first viewing, I would give it an 8 out of 10. And I've heard a couple other people talk about this too, in that it's hard to review in like as a complete movie, because it does end on sort of a cliffhanger.
Yeah.
And
it's
so
an intentionally incomplete story. So
right. And so initially I was, with all the build up to it, up until probably the time that the reviews came out, I was hoping this would be my favorite Marvel movie, because in some ways the first Avengers is maybe not my favorite Marvel movie anymore, but it's still up there, and there's something special to me about it because it was the build up of all of those solo movies, of bringing all those characters together. And from the very first time that Iron Man came in, where you get that after credit scene of Nick Fury, you know, hinting about the Avengers. So this sort of had a similar place, because I didn't really love Age of Ultron. So that was sort of a letdown. I was hoping to a certain extent to see sort of a good team up movie like what we got in the first Avengers. When the reviews started to come in, and I started, of course, they didn't give away spoilers, but I started to understand the movie a little bit more in terms of, yeah, there are just so many characters that they have to kind of be separated out into little groups, and Thanos is really the connective tissue of this movie. I mean, he really has to be. There's so much going on, and so much of it is the quest to stop him, that you kind of have to have him as the protagonist. Otherwise, it's just going to be like a bunch of little scenes assembled together. So,
right.
So I think in understanding that, I kind of readjusted my expectations a little bit, and I liked it. I mean, I was impressed with just what they were able to do, juggling, like we've said, that many characters on screen. Just that fact alone. You know, I think I rated it probably my 7th or 8th favorite Marvel movie out of what we've seen so far.
Yeah.
I'm going to go back and see it a second time. I'd like to see it in IMAX. I'm not sure if I'm going to make the trip to Buford to actually do that, but I'd like to see it in IMAX. But I definitely do want to see it a second time. But I liked it. I guess I like better what it set up for the 4th Avengers movie. So I'll leave it on that.
Okay.
So let's just go ahead and get into the movie itself and spoilers. I don't know what you want to start with here. I guess we can start with kind of the beginning, and we start off basically, if people saw Thor Ragnarok, there's an after credits scene on that kind of tells you what's going to be happening in Infinity War, and they really just pick up right after that. What were your first impressions of just the start of the movie?
Well, the first time I saw it, I was just like, okay, they're not playing. Like, you know, this is just the equivalent of, I mean, it's like, well, I'll use this example with you, but it's like debuting someone in WWE coming in and like crushing their top person
Right.
and be like, guess who's here now? You know, like, and I'm just like, all right, this Thanos guy is getting a real push, you know, like he's just so like, there was so many different emotions because I was really excited to see Thanos do something other than sit in a chair, you know, and to see Josh Brolin like emote through him and stuff. Also knowing in that opening scene on Thor's ship, like this is just not going to end well for the heroes, but how badly is it going to end? And you know, seeing we're in spoilers now. Okay, so like seeing Hulk get the crap kicked out of him with all they've established for Hulk, was just like, okay, all right then, this is going to be something. And you know, just starting to see. I mean, it was overwhelming. Like it was just, but in a cool way. Like there were just so many different, really impressive things happening. The second time I watched it, I already had all the knowledge of how Thanos operates and what he's planning on doing and how he views things. So then I started thinking things like, I wonder if like Valkyrie and Korg and stuff were like in the living half of that ship.
Yeah.
And then I was like, but the ship blew up. So like, so did the rules not apply there, or like what?
They're really vague on that because Thor does mention later on that Thanos only killed half of the people on the ship. So my theory is that this is, it kind of doesn't really make sense, because why wouldn't he have done that for more than half of them or whatever? But anyway, my theory is probably that Heimdall used the Bifrost to transport half of them away in the same way that he transported the Hulk to Earth.
And he could have potentially done that before he sustained whatever injury that was about to kill him. I mean, that would make sense. I would also considered that maybe Thanos just imprisoned the other half, because he's got a ginormous ship.
Yeah.
That really dwarfs the size of the ship they were on. But I don't really understand why he would do that, because he's not really a prisoner taker. He just will leave those people alone to live.
Right.
But they certainly weren't living on that ship because it exploded. So that's the thing. There must have been some kind of escape. Yeah.
And it doubly sucks for them, because you wonder if then after he killed half of them, which seems to be his policy, if then another half of them dusted away after that.
Oh gosh.
Or I mean, because like I don't think he could control it enough to be like, nah, I've already taken care of their half. Leave the
Yeah,
Asgardians alone,
yeah.
Gauntlet. You know.
Don't let them do that. Like if they're speaking into
So
it like a Secret Service microphone or something.
so so it's probably down to like a fourth of the Asgardians now.
Yeah. Boy, Asgard's really been getting, the screws put to them lately, man.
They
They
did,
can't catch it. They can't catch a break.
they did like Loki had a point, like things were going pretty well when it was just him there.
Yeah, I mean
So
Matt Damon was there,
yeah,
you know.
they had good entertainment.
Yeah,
He
the
was
guy
he was a pretty solid ruler.
the guy from Jurassic Park, has plenty of grapes to go around. It was good.
Yep. Yep.
Man, yeah, man, they've just gotten a raw deal. I'm
Right.
just thinking back from like Ragnarok to this, and now even pointing that out with the snap. I'm just like, oh my gosh, poor
Yeah.
Asgard.
Yeah. All at
Yeah,
the it's all at the expense of Thor of having to really change that character and basically take everything away from him. And I mean,
yeah.
literally everything was taken away from him. I mean, his hammer, his family, his friends, his home world. So,
That
um,
was a that while we're talking about that conversation he had with Rocket
that's what I
again
was
on the
thinking of.
second viewing was really cool. Like Thor has become like a top tier favorite to me now through
He's
Ragnarok.
he's my favorite. He's my favorite in the MCU now. And of course, his contract's about to end, so
Yeah.
he's probably done. But
Well, I always thought his first film was underrated compared to the others
that's what I
because
think.
I've always loved the story of that one. Kenneth Branagh is no director to snooze on in the first place. He's really talented, and just the story about pride and humility and stuff in that first film, which is interesting because it seems as though it's like he went from, it's like he's kind of living the Job story twice
Hmm.
almost. He was stripped of all his power and everything, and only have it returned, and now he's really having everything taken from him, and so it's an interesting. They certainly have. Strangely enough, I think with him and Stark, not so much Cap in this movie. I felt like Cap kind of got the short end. I mean, what are you going to do with all these characters?
Right.
But I don't feel like he got as much attention as everybody else, as many as the primary Avengers go, anyways. But Thor and Stark both seem to hit a certain rock bottom in this film where it's like, I've got nothing left.
Hmm.
And so I'm just gonna the kind of thing they would do in a show before somebody kicks it.
Yeah.
Just strip everything away from them. So it wouldn't surprise me if Thor had some sort of heroic outing in the second half. Although I was talking to my wife about that, trying to tell her through her disapproval of this film. She hasn't seen it yet, and I don't think she wants to now that I've told her what happened.
Right.
She's a big fan of Black Panther and of Spider-Man and Thor. Anyway,
Yeah.
I'm digressing, but the they have an out with Thor since he's a cosmic figure
Right.
that he could just go somewhere,
And
and so that way, if they wanted to bring him back, they could.
and that's what I think's that would be my guess as to what will happen because especially they could have done the whole thing with Valkyrie, with Korg, and with the other Asgardians to where Heimdall sent them somewhere, didn't have time to tell Thor where he was sending them, and probably also wouldn't have wanted to have said that out loud because then Thanos could have heard it or killed him, whatever. But maybe he sent them off somewhere. Maybe that's their out for Thor is he's got to go off and find them because it's interesting. I actually listened to an interview with Hemsworth the other day, and he was talking about how like he approached Kevin Feige about hey, my contract's ending. What are we going to do with this? And basically, it was Feige choosing to not re-up it and saying that would be a conversation down the road. So I think like as opposed to like Chris Evans, where I think Cap Captain America has probably the best chance of permanently dying, because not only because of the storyline in the comics, not really from Infinity War as much as Civil War, but still,
Yeah.
um, not only because of what happens in the comics, but Chris Evans has said, he really kind of wants to be done with acting and just purely direct. So I think they've got a good out there to use his character to make the sacrifice. Thor could go off somewhere. Iron Man, Iron Man's always like, Tony Stark is always like teetering on whether or not he's even like physically able to continue to be Iron Man. Maybe they give him a send off with Pepper and they go off to have a family. They kind of hinted at that at the start of this movie, but yeah, I think Cap's still the most likely one, and they have some outs with some of the others, including Thor.
Yeah, and I think it would be so. Yeah, I mean, Cap is probably the smartest play, and I wouldn't be surprised if he was one of the ones to go. I mean, it's a I wouldn't say an obvious choice, but it's probably the most sensible one,
Mm-hmm.
given his character, what he would probably do in those situations. What would there be left for him to do that would be interesting
Yeah.
in that universe? Where else would he be going? And like Thor, you could like we said, you could write off and you could keep him off screen, off planet, and still bring him back if you came up with a better idea to use him again. And Iron Man, I was just about to say the same thing for Cap, because so much around the emotional weight and accountability of what has been happening
Mm-hmm.
since since the beginning has been on his shoulders. But um, and this will just lead into what I believe about that, last scene of the movie. Um, he has gained like this parental responsibility to Spider-Man.
Right.
So like unless they want to emotionally torture Tom Holland more and then ergo turn him into Tobey Maguire and ruin that whole franchise, it would hate for him to lose another father figure.
Well,
Um,
I almost wonder if I agree with you on that, but I agree with you on that depending on how they handle the Uncle Ben story in that, because I mean they just, I don't think they mentioned, did they mention Uncle Ben at all in Homecoming?
I mean, it was not. I was very pleased that it was such a little to no plot point at all, because we've
Mhm.
seen that. I don't know who we've seen die more, Uncle Ben or Bruce Wayne's parents,
Right.
but at least he doesn't have an Aunt Martha.
Yes.
So, but there's um, I feel like it was referenced at some point. Well, I will say this: in Civil War, he gave a very roundabout way of quoting the "with great power comes great responsibility" quote
Hmm.
to Tony Stark.
Okay.
It was such a I'm not gonna say it, but I'm saying it line. It's like
Gotcha.
when bad things happen and you have the power to stop it and you don't do it, then it's your fault that it happened or something. And he's
Gotcha.
just come on, say the line. No.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, where I was going with that
yeah, sorry, go ahead.
real quick was just to say that I wasn't sure how much they were altering in this incarnation of Spider-Man. I wasn't sure how much they were altering his backstory. Obviously, as they've pointed out many times, as Tony Stark pointed out, he has a like suspiciously hot aunt, Aunt May, and so I wasn't sure what they were going to do with that backstory. Like maybe if in this world Uncle Ben just doesn't exist, and maybe Tony Stark was going to somehow sub in
Oh gosh.
for Uncle Ben and be the whole, with great power comes great responsibility. Maybe not from, obviously it wouldn't be from Uncle Ben, like it wouldn't be the same as Uncle Ben dying because of Peter, but maybe Tony makes that sacrifice to help bring Peter back and gets the
Right.
opportunity to say that to him. So that was just all where I was going with that.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that would be interesting if they were kind of giving us the long con the whole time. And Tony Stark was like being the surrogate Uncle Ben, because there
Mm-hmm.
it wasn't like a wasn't one there. Maybe Toby Maguire's really Uncle Ben in their universe. Who knows?
No, that
I'm just
no.
kidding. I'm kidding. No, that would be terrible. I was trying to think of who, if who would be age appropriate to have married Marissa Tomei in that universe. That could be visible.
Right.
But no, I don't know. Like I'm really happy that they didn't go through the Uncle Ben storyline and Homecoming. Anyways, it's
Yes.
been a waste of
Yes.
screen time.
Right.
Yeah, nah, but like Spider-Man was great. Well, so one thing talking about Homecoming and all that stuff, something I really liked about the film, not just the culmination of it all, but was the character, um, uh, um, the callbacks to previous like jokes or character things, like character specific qualities of previous films. Like, for example, they have a running gag about Kevin Bacon and Footloose in the
Hmm.
Guardians of the Galaxy movies, and the fact that that came back up again, just like really casually, was I laughed loudly when that came up, especially like when Peter Parker is there to just crap on everybody's nostalgia
Right.
all the time, talking about how like Aliens is this super old movie and Footloose was never that good and all this kind of stuff.
I
I found to be really entertaining.
Yeah, I did love the fact that they ended up using his plan of copying aliens or copying Alien to get rid of Ma. Was it Ma,
Yeah,
the guy who was torturing Doctor Strange? Yeah, I liked that.
yeah. I kind of liked Maw too the second time around. There's
Hmm.
something just so slimy about like trying to convince everyone they should be thankful that they're about to be killed by Thanos.
Right.
It was so like over the top and grandiose. I found it humorous by the second time. Maybe it was just a defense mechanism, so I didn't get depressed. But like it was just like today is the day of your salvation.
Right.
It sounds really twisted evangelist or something. It was weird.
Yeah. Um, yeah. I think for me, the opening scene didn't really surprise me that much. Like I was expecting because I'd seen enough from the previews to kind of just guess what was going to happen there. And well, not just the previews, but interviews that I'd read where I don't remember if it was the Russos or Feige or who, maybe all of them that were talking about how Thanos makes his presence known early, like in the first scene, there's a big death. And so it's like, okay, well, Thor doesn't die because we see him in later scenes. So it's the only other option is Loki. So I expected Loki to die. I think the thing that really surprised me was Red Skull's appearance, and of course, then tied in with that, Gamora's death there,
Yeah.
which um, I think we kind of disagree a little bit on this, but I think she'll come back because I, Guardians 3 is coming. I think they'll bring her back. I think, her death was, even though she wasn't dusted away at the end, her death was directly tied to the Soul Stone. You see the younger version of her soul at the very end. I think they're going to find a way to bring her back too. I think the only deaths that will probably stick, just from the standpoint of their contracts being up and Thor's going away one way or another too, are the Asgardian deaths like Loki and Heimdall. So so the whole Red Skull and Gamora thing surprised me. Even though I don't think it'll stick, but I enjoyed it. I enjoyed it at the time though.
Yeah, I'm coming around a little bit on what I think about Gamora. The thing that sticks with me though, here's a couple of theories, is well, first of all, that scene was so stinking powerful. Like
It
it
was,
was,
yeah.
uh, oh gosh, that was still that I was still held my breath even the second time I watched that scene. I was just so credit to again to Brolin and to Zoe Saldana for that scene. Like it was just, oh man, it was just so awful. But well executed. So some of my vague familiarity about what the Infinity Stones or gems or whatever are and what they can do. They set the precedent that to acquire the Soul Stone demanded a sacrifice, and it's like a soul for a soul. And what I've heard from others in the comics, at least, is that the Soul Stone like houses an actual world like inside it,
Mhm.
and it imprisons the souls of people, or has the ability to do that. So, if Gamora was a sacrifice to acquire the stone, there's very much a chance that she's just trapped within that stone, which means she could be released,
Mhm.
or their soul could be released. So there's a chance she could be coming back. I was hesitant to suggest that she might be coming back because that's the one of the first things I did was like check like her IMDb resume and stuff. After it came out, I was like, nah, no, she can't be gone. She can't be gone. And then I remembered she's one of the principal characters in Avatar,
Yeah.
whose sequels are all about to get started in the next few years. So, I mean, there's a chance she might not be available for Guardians 3. I don't know, but I think, and that would leave a gap that would need to be filled. And where that comes in is that we never saw the circumstances in which Thanos acquired the first stone, the power stone from the planet, what's it called, Xandar,
Yeah.
where the dance off fight took place and stuff in the first Guardians film.
Right.
Well, there's a superhero from that planet called Nova,
Hmm.
um, who, from what I understand, came to be when the like entire Nova Corps, that army, that fought alongside them, was wiped out at one point, and like all of the power of that army was like poured into like one person, and so he'd be like the last remaining member or something, and someone even either suggested or did say that the character that John C. Riley played um, in the first Guardians movie, like whatever his character's name is, actually like is is the person who like projects that power onto whoever receives it and ends up becoming Nova or something. So I mean I know very little about it, but if they were to go that route in the third film, like that could be someone who could slide in and take that place. They have Mantis now, so they do still have a female with them.
Well, and
Although
maybe Nebula too. I mean, Nebula
it's true,
has not exactly part of the group quite yet, but I mean, they could use that movie to make her part of the
yeah.
core group.
But I don't think her death is as solid as Loki, Heimdall, or Vision for that matter. Like I thought Vision would have had a chance the way Scarlet Witch destroyed the stone, but when Thanos just took a scoop full of his forehead out, I'm not really sure how that'll go.
Well, see, I am more confident. I think even of Vision coming back than Gamora because um,
He's not human.
T'Challa's right because he's not human, and T'Challa's sister, what's her name? I can't think of her name.
I got you. Hold on, Shuri.
Shuri, yeah, Shuri. She was busy downloading his consciousness or whatever. So I think it may be, I mean, he's not human, so it's like kind of like copying a computer file or something, or
Right.
copying a photo or a Word document or whatever. She may not have gotten, she wasn't finished, so she didn't get all of it, but she may have basically gotten enough to save his essence into, some form.
Dude, she's the smartest character in that whole universe. They'll probably end up creating something better.
Right. Yeah.
You know?
Right. Yeah.
Like a Wakandan vision, like that would
Right.
be bonkers. Bring back Michael B. Jordan and have him be the Wakandan vision. And that way you get both. No. No. But yeah, no, yeah, no. I can see that. It just seemed, I would say at least that iteration. I don't even know if that means Paul Bettany um or what, but I don't think he'll come back the same, you
No.
know.
Right. I agree.
Um but there's certainly some permanent death. And I think, there's a little bit, I'd written some notes here, like I said Marvel for now has stakes. Like one of the biggest accusations is that their films don't have stakes. Like, well, they just wiped out a bunch of their heroes, and even if you don't buy the finger snap deaths, there's still some pretty serious ones on the table. So I think it depends on how they handle this going forward. Like if the slate is entirely clean on this, and the only deaths we're left with permanently are Loki and Heimdall, and maybe one of the principal Avengers by the end of the fourth one,
Mhm.
then yeah, maybe we'll have, maybe that argument can be brought back up again. But as it stands for now, they've taken a pretty big bite out of that argument.
Yeah, it's just it's tough for me to trust it just from the standpoint of um, when they brought, like in the first Avengers film when they killed Coulson, I'm like, oh, they might have actually killed him, and then
Yeah,
then we found out about Agents of Shield, and I'm glad he came back for that. But then when Captain America Winter Soldier came along and it looked like they killed Samuel L. Jackson, I'm like, okay, well, they pulled kind of the switcheroo on us with Coulson. They're not going to, I guess Nick Fury will stay dead, because if he doesn't, if you do this like back to back, you're going to start to, people aren't going to trust deaths anymore. And so then,
right.
and so then he came back. And so, you know, we've had others like,
I think Quicksilver's the only one who stays dead.
Quicksilver did stay dead. Quicksilver did stay dead, and I don't know that anyone was like, "Oh no, you can't kill Quicksilver."
Right.
He was fine, but the X-Men version of Quicksilver ended up turning out to be
Oh
a
yeah, he
much
was good.
better character. So Quicksilver stayed dead. You know, and then of course, like when Black Panther died in Black Panther, you knew he was not going to stay dead. So
Right.
it's just one of those things where I almost wish that Marvel would stop with the death fake outs, because
Yeah.
I don't need those, and it almost just kind of annoys me, because I know for the most part, like especially if it's midway through the superhero's own movie, like you're not going to kill him. So
Yeah.
find some other way to have stakes with that.
Right. Well, too, like anybody who follows this remotely, follows the universe remotely, or has any I don't know, familiarity with the general storyline, the 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 dust deaths, all those are going to be temporary anyways. So
Right.
I'm kind of already accepting that those are going to be fake out deaths.
Hmm.
So for them to take a step further and then fake out on the ones that had legitimacy to them, at least when they happened,
Right.
like I mean, like unless you're gonna do one whole fell swoop, like one of the heroes gets the gauntlet
Yeah.
and just undoes everything that happened, which will be a whole nother topic,
Right.
of how effective would that film be. I don't know. I don't know. But I will say if that's probably going to continue to be an argument that comes up with each film. One though that I think at least for now people can shut up about is the Marvel villain problem, because I think they've had
Hmm.
like four consecutive films where they've had pretty worthy antagonists.
Right.
Um, and Thanos is right, probably right at the top of the list for right now, I'd say.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, he was surprisingly well rounded and fleshed out. You know, the whole, again, like if you really want to get down and dissect the motivations here, his plan is not great, because the whole kill half of the life in the universe in order to create balance. Well, number one, that's only temporary balance. Like if the problem is, if you think the problem is overpopulation, that's only going to be a temporary solution. It's going to set the problem back a while, but eventually it'll just get back there. You haven't created any kind of sustainable solution for that. Number two, not every civilization is going to be at a point where it's having an overpopulation, overcrowding problem. So there's probably going to be civilizations out there where they need the people that they have. Like you kill half of them, and it's probably going to cost them the other half. So So it doesn't really make sense, but it doesn't need to make sense because I mean, at least he does have a reason that you can understand and kind of identify with it, even if it's kind of poorly fleshed out. But so much of it comes from his own like personal wound, and so
Right.
that's always such a big thing with characters is they're what what's called a core wound that drives their motivations, and you don't see that any more clearly than anyone with than Thanos, because it was his home world that originally happened with, and it cost them everything. So that's why he's basically become obsessed with it.
Yeah, and I have a really oversimplified rationale for why his plan is flawed the way it is. And why, and then another criticism I heard is like, well, instead of eliminating half the universe, why didn't he just create more research? Yeah, see, that's why he's a villain,
Right.
is because his plan is imperfect. It's psychopathic. It's the old I don't know, Jared, if we talked about this, but someone from my job showed me this. I read this meme, or it might have been our friend from college, Sam Reese, who might have posted this, but it was like a meme from the Star Wars prequels
Hmm.
where Natalie Portman is talking to Obi-Wan and Anakin, and she says, I have 10 children and 7 chairs. Like, what do I do to fix this problem? And they answer simultaneously. And Obi-Wan says, add 3 chairs. And Anakin says, kill 3 kids. You know? And like,
Right.
because that's how a villain would answer that
Hmm.
question. So, I mean, yeah, there are better solutions, but like, he's not the villain because he has a bad plan. He's a villain because he's has a mad way of looking at the world. And he even said that about his own planet. Like, he's like, they called me mad for this. I'm like, yeah, because you are. I mean, like, he certainly cares about the problem, but his solution to it is a little aggressive.
Yeah. Although,
Um,
a couple of things like, for one, he he did point out that he was basically fair about it. Like he wasn't an elitist or
I did
anything.
like, yeah, that was very
Yeah, I mean, he was like rich,
fair.
poor, everyone's got the same chance. So that was kind of cool. And even in his fights with all of the Marvel heroes, he had so many opportunities to kill people.
Right.
And every
That
time,
wasn't his MO. Yeah.
no, he wasn't interested in killing them.
He was on a quest.
Right. And he actually probably made things harder for himself, by not just going ahead and killing some of them. Just to kind of, just from a numbers standpoint, so that they had fewer chances to try to stop him, or kill the most powerful ones of them, or something. So it was interesting. So at times, I don't know that I would say I found myself rooting for him, or at least not intentionally rooting for him, but you did sort of respect him in certain ways.
Off the top of my head, I can only think of 3 characters he directly murdered, and all 3 of them were in the process of an acquisition of a stone. I mean, if you don't count him snapping his fingers, I should say, and killing
Yeah.
like half the universe. But like he he gets the stone, one stone from Loki, who tries to murder him immediately, and he kills him as a result because technically his life was being threatened. Um, he kills Vision, but he's going for the stone.
Hmm.
And he kills Gamora because he has to do that to get a stone. Like,
Right.
so, like, even then, he's not being vengeful with anybody. He's actually on the defensive in this entire fight, which is so weird. So he really is. He's this psychopathic protagonist. That's what he is.
Right.
He's on the villain's journey instead of the hero's journey, I guess you could say.
Right.
To acquire all this stuff, and then, yeah. So that is interesting. And then, yeah, like his fairness, and like it struck me really odd, but in a cool way, that he respects them, in a way. Like he had that line to Tony Stark. He's like, I admire you or something. He's like, I hope they remember you, you know,
Yeah.
and the people that are left behind. And the oh gosh, there was something else about that I thought was interesting. It's just that his um like the way that he treated that quest like a burden, you know?
Right.
Like he never really there is some kind of a line in the trailer about how it does put a smile on his face or something like that. But he really never seemed to glory in causing pain to anyone else. Like he is very no country for old men, kind of, very just direct and
Right.
about the mission, not about it wasn't personal, it was business
Right.
in a way.
Right. Um, yeah, I mean, the other kind of shifting points here, the thing with this would have been more enjoyable, I think, or I could have at least accepted the stakes for a year or so if we didn't know Marvel's release schedule.
Yeah.
I mean, when you've got Spider-Man Homecoming 2 already on the schedule, and even though they haven't officially put Guardians 3 on the schedule, they had verbally mentioned it, and then
Yeah.
actually
We've
uh,
got James Gunn tweeting about the, Awesome Mix Volume 3, trying to figure that out and stuff.
right. Well, and just today, Chris Pratt wished the actress who
I
played
saw that.
played yeah, who played Mantis a happy birthday and was like, "Oh yeah, I can't wait to start filming Guardians 3 with you on such and such date." So, um and so I guess we need to check out to see like when Zoe Saldana's birthday is.
Yeah, I know. We'll just start monitoring his Instagram feed. Come on, come on. Give us
Right.
something. Give us something.
Imagine somebody will have a conversation with him about that. But
Oh man.
what was really great, this is another side note too, is you need to go look up an interview that Don Cheadle and Mark Ruffalo did several months ago, or maybe even going on a year ago. I think this was before Thor Ragnarok even came out, because they were talking about what happened in that, and he was trying to avoid spoiling that. But anyway, so it was basically like it's basically like Disney has to pair these guys off. They have to pair off someone who's terrible at keeping spoilers with someone who's pretty good at keeping spoilers. So they
It's like
always
a
had
buddy system.
it is it's like a buddy system. And so they always had there's a video on social media going around about Benedict Cumberbatch keeping Tom Holland from revealing spoilers. And I actually saw today where like supposedly they still haven't let Tom Holland read the script for Avengers 4. so, so I don't know if that's true or not, because you would think he's got to be, well, I'm sure he's filmed his scenes, but I guess they haven't let him read the entire script.
Yeah, well,
So,
there weren't a whole lot of people who had read the entire script of Infinity War either, because I could
right.
remember some people saying, I remember Sebastian Stan, Bucky saying like, "Oh yeah, the premiere was the first time I saw it,"
Yeah.
or whatever, or knew what was going to happen. It's pretty crazy, whatever.
Right. Well,
But
and just to finish that off real quick, yeah, just so Don Cheadle was with Mark Ruffalo, and Mark Ruffalo would constantly be like, "Well, can I say something about this?" And Don Cheadle's just like, I wouldn't, just don't. And so finally, and then all of a sudden, the interviewer asks something, and he talks about people dying in Thor Ragnarok, and Ruffalo's like, "Well, wait till you see this next one. Everybody dies." And Don Cheadle turns to him. He's like, "Dude." And so this wasn't a scripted moment. And so Mark Ruffalo's like, "Oh my gosh, am I going to get in trouble?" And Don Cheadle's like, "Well, probably," and he's like, "Oh no," and he just kept going with it. And Don Cheadle literally says at one point, like, "Just move on. Let's just move on." And he just kept making the problem worse. And so Don Cheadle finally just had to like change the subject, just like do one of these, and like go to another question. But so Mark Ruffalo just spoiled Avengers Infinity War at the
oh my
time, but
gosh,
nobody really realized it that much. So
that's amazing. Oh
yeah.
man, that's so amazing. I get to see them now as being like, okay, Mark, just because of that, no Hulk action at all.
Right, right,
You're gonna
right,
lose your one fight and then no Hulk at all.
right, right.
Oh man, yeah.
Um, so what, I guess, do you have any particular, if you had to put out a theory as to how this is going to get resolved, do you have one, or is it still kind of floating between a few different theories of how they're going to undo some of the stuff in Avengers 4?
Well, um, there's a couple of things I think, and they all kind of branch off, towards each other. One, I think it all starts to me with Doctor Strange's comment about there being one scenario where they're victorious, and I think that scenario is still in play.
Mm-hmm.
Um, what I don't know is that when he gives up the time stone to Thanos, um, he says something to Tony about this was the only way, or we're in the end game now, and I take that as one of two ways. Like either Tony had to still be alive because he spared Tony's life for giving up the stone, and they made a big deal about how he would never actually do that if he had to choose between the stone and Tony's life,
Right.
and he ends up doing it anyways. So either his scenario involves Iron Man still being alive, or it involves actually having to allow Thanos to complete the gauntlet,
Yeah.
and they're going to be victorious somehow else, like allowing him to snap his fingers and stuff. And I'm much more intrigued by the latter than the former in that situation. Um, I'm also really intrigued in that conversation he has with Child Gamora after he does it. Like what I would really like to see happen. Don't ask me how, because I don't know that I could write a good way for this to happen. But I would like his grief over having sacrificed Gamora get to him and have him voluntarily undo even just one thing, even if it was bringing back Gamora, and that ends up setting up his demise.
Right.
Like the fact that he couldn't cope with what it cost him to get that.
Right.
Um, so I mean, that's what I would like to see, but I don't know that they'll really delve that deep into that. Otherwise, some theories. Another theory I might have is that would involve Nebula maybe being key to taking him down, or at least getting that from him. There is a really interesting explanation I read in an article that was referencing one of the comic storylines when Thanos like lost the gauntlet, is that he was in some sort of like meditative state, like on a soul plane or something like that. And so I think it was Nebula who tried to come steal the gauntlet from him while he was in that state. And he had a subconscious awareness that was happening, and he allowed her to do it. And another character who won't be in either of these films confronts him on that, and he tells Thanos, he's like, you actually let that happen on purpose because deep down you knew you weren't worthy to possess this.
Hmm.
And like they have painted him as so like um it's weird to say that he's human because he's a genocidal maniac,
Right.
but they've given him such a human angle that I think they could make that work. Like if he'd become obsessed with this goal, he achieves it and he realizes that what it cost him and he regrets it.
Right.
Um, so I would be interested in that because otherwise, what is he going to do for this fourth film? Because he went on his quest, he achieved it, he literally did the thing he said he was going to do, which was I'm going to take a rest and look at the sunrise.
Mm-hmm.
And so, unless the next movie is just like, oh, it's all about the Avengers and their plan and their execution, and he's just going to be there when they go to try to execute their plan, it's going to feel really disjointed to me because they spent so much time. Like you said, he was the connective tissue to everybody else.
Mm-hmm.
Um, unless the someone else is going to be the connective tissue in this next movie. I don't know. I would like to see actually kind of more of him, and in his wrestling with that. But I don't know. What do you think?
I really don't know how they're gonna resolve it, but I think in
Oh,
terms of
also Captain Marvel. She's
uh,
going to do something. Yeah.
right. Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I guess that's going to inform some of the stuff because the Captain Marvel movie will come out before Avengers 4 next year. So I am interested to see how she's going to play into things. Some people theorize that whatever that weird little device was that Nick Fury sent the message to her on was had the capability of sending messages through time. Because you wonder, like, because we know that the Captain Marvel movie is going to be set in the 90s. So, where has Captain Marvel been for the past 20 plus years?
My
So,
theory, I have a theory on that. I think they're
yeah,
just going to pull like a Captain America 1, like she's just going to be in space. And
yeah,
like the last time she was on Earth, it was the 90s, so she had a pager, you know.
yeah.
But I don't know. A time traveling pager would be very interesting tech, though.
Right. That actually would be pretty interesting. Um, so I feel like I'm not sure how Thanos is going to be incorporated, but I feel like if this is going to be the last kind of the last hurrah for the original Avengers, then then it makes sense that they got rid of Doctor Strange, most of the Guardians, Black Panther, Spider-Man, in order to really kind of focus on these characters: Thor, Cap, Iron Man, Black Widow, Hulk, presumably Hawkeye will come back, and kind of give them, um, one last kind of ride together. So I think that's probably going to be the focus for the film. And I think there's one comic storyline where Iron Man wears the gauntlet. He
Hmm.
he you know he has his own gauntlet and has all the Infinity Stones. I don't remember if that was when to reverse what Thanos did in a comic storyline or do something else, but at one point he does. That would also be my guess too. He was the one who started it all. If this is going to be kind of his last appearance or his last big appearance, he may not necessarily die. I still think Captain America is the one who's more likely to die, but I think they'll give Tony the other big heroic moment out of that.
Hmm.
So that's kind of, I guess, what I'm thinking, and that's really what I would like to see, is to see this group together again, because I think with the original Avengers, like I said, I really did enjoy that movie. I was let down by Age of Ultron, and then since then we've kind of had them split up, and in Civil War they're fighting one another. In Infinity War Part 1 they're still all separated. So I think if I had any kind of disappointment or critique with the Marvel universe, is that I just enjoyed kind of that team dynamic, because that was what especially Joss Whedon did so well with all of his shows and movies. Firefly, Buffy, Avengers, everything is that team dynamic is just right in his wheelhouse. And the Russos did a great job with this film with juggling all those characters. But that's still a different dynamic from like a half dozen team members or so.
Yeah.
So kind of wish actually that Whedon was doing Avengers 4, but hopefully we'll still get a good one out of the Russos.
There was so much going on in that film. Like, I felt you got really like teases of that.
Yeah,
But they're just, and that's what I had written down. That's one of the cons for me, is that there was too much going on to allow for moments to kind of breathe on
right.
screen. I wasn't even thinking about that with the team ups until you mentioned it. But like, I would have loved to seen a little bit more of like Bucky and Rocket, together. Or there was even, and it didn't really dawn on me right away, but when they do the charge towards the front line of the battle, you see Cap and Black Panther gain and create distance between them and the rest of the army,
Right.
because of course they're super powered, and the
Right.
rest of them aren't, and that was just a neat little nod. And then I thought Cap and Thor's little facial hair exchange was actually pretty funny. It
Yeah.
was I got a kick out of that. And then, gosh, there was another team up moment that all the girls teaming up to take down that one Thanos henchman. I thought was
Yeah,
pretty awesome too.
yeah. Proxima, I
Um,
think Proxima Midnight, I think is their
yes,
name.
yes, her, yeah.
I love the Thor Rocket Groot
That's a
interactions. I
great
mean,
little team.
I would watch a movie. Like if you could give me like what would be a couple of movies that you would want to see out of these characters, it would be like either Thor with all of the Guardians or just Thor with Rocket and Groot, and then the other one would be like a Bucky Falcon team up.
Yes, I've been wanting to see a Bucky Falcon team up since Civil War.
Yeah,
Like, I'm like, this is the Lethal Weapon movie I never got to see.
right,
Like, these two guys together, like they just hate each other, but they work so well together.
right.
Was really fun. There were a couple of things that I wish, like, I was thinking more of like emotional parts where I was like, man, I'm just about to have a reaction, and then they cut to something else.
Hmm.
Um, the scene that first caught my attention with that was when like Tony like officially like christened Spider-Man as an Avenger.
Right.
I was like, oh man, that that's like kind of a big deal, to Peter. And then Spider-Man had the best death out of all their deaths.
Yeah.
But I felt Groot got a little robbed. Now, granted, he's died once, and I guess he had his moment there. But
Yeah, I felt more for I felt more for Groot, and I'm sure I'm in a tiny minority on this one, because I mean even like Tom Holland's performance was the best, and I think I sent you that link where it was improvised actually with I think all of his lines maybe were improvised from that.
well,
Um,
he was like the only one who really got to speak in that scene.
he was,
Too.
yeah. Yeah, I mean, like anything more than a few words, I mean,
Yeah.
Bucky gets Steve out and
Yeah.
then fades away. But yeah, like little Groot was by far for me the most pitiful. And knowing they're all coming back, but I think it was just like I think it was seeing like knowing that he's a kid too,
Yeah.
and seeing him like kind of have a character arc within that movie to where he's just like the moody teenager who doesn't want to get involved. And then he, basically saves Thor's life by forging the hammer. And then by the end, he's like all
That
up.
was an awesome moment too. I
It
thought.
it
Yeah.
really was. It really was. And that was one of those things where it was kind of given away, actually by some of the
Toys,
toys.
right? Yeah.
Yeah, because they're like, wait a minute, why is that's Groot's tree limb. So, but it was still still a great moment. And then by the end, like he's full on board. Like as soon as he and Thor and Rocket show up, like they're what was kind of funny to go back and see on YouTube was like when they show up, they're kind of separated from the other group there that's fighting, and it's just like just another wave of those Ori or whatever they are, the lizard kind of guys, and so Thor goes like charging at just like hundreds of them, and
Yeah.
like Rocket and Groot like running right along. Like
Yes.
right along behind him, like, what are you gonna do? But of course, then Thor like leaps up into the air and summons this giant like
Oh man.
lightning bolt that just wipes out a ton of them. But so to see him have that little arc, and then for him to be laying there at the end, like it was just so pitiful. Just this little I am Groot,
I know.
and then Rocket having to see Rocket, see him die for a second time.
Well,
That was the only one where I was really like, I mean, even as great as Tom Holland's performance was, I was like, you'll be fine. You're going to get another movie.
right.
But the Groot one, I was just like,
And the thing about Rocket and Groot to me too is like, well, Guardians is kind of like my sentimental favorite franchise out of all the films. I mean, like, listen, like all the films are great, but
right.
I had such low expectations for the notion of this franchise when it started. Then when I saw it, I was
Yeah.
like, holy cow, this is amazing.
Right.
And when you look like, and again, this just goes back to there not being a lot of time. Everything just moves so fast paced. Is that not only did Rocket see an adult Groot die the first time, and he was his best friend,
Mm-hmm.
the second film totally explores the fact that Rocket identifies with Yondu because he is so afraid of being rejected by a family that he pushes everybody away. So it was like his only friend
Right.
that died the first time. And so he raises this stick,
Hmm.
that grows into this Groot. So he is now like the father figure to that Groot
Right.
instead of, so he is just as much losing a child as Iron Man is to Spider-Man in that moment,
Right. Right.
And
More
like,
so, really. You know.
yeah, really, yeah, exactly. And so like, um it's, I don't know, it was, I think that's another reason why I really liked that conversation between Rocket and Thor, is
Mhm.
because they let Rocket be a little more mature that
Mhm.
he had gained at the end of Guardians 2, once he realized that people who love you won't actually leave you.
Right.
And when, like, what he Thor has this, this line about how he's killed 3,000 men and fate will not allow him to lose to Thanos, and the Rocket just looks genuinely concerned, and he's like, well, what if you're wrong?
Yeah. Well, and more, even more ominous to me was he Thor's like recounting everything that he's lost, and he says, "What more can I lose?"
Yeah,
And so, well, half of humanity.
yeah, that's a big one.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I will say real quick, because that was such a, like, if I was going to be in, you know moved to, like, get out of my chair, like that moment where they all show up, it's like,
Yeah.
the whole Wakandan battle is pretty much like superhero Return of the King,
Right.
um, which is not a criticism. That battle was awesome in Return of the King too, but like, this whole like Pelennor Fields battle going on, and Thor's pretty much like Aragorn, showing up at the last moment.
Right.
Um, when he crashes down there, um, I had heard another critic like reference the fact that whenever characters are introduced in Infinity War, they stay true to their character's musical theme
Hmm.
that shows up. Like, you see it with Guardians, they actually play like, a 70s track or whatever.
Oh, okay.
And everybody else gets their orchestral score. It would have been really cool if they had brought Led Zeppelin in for that moment.
Yeah.
I
Right.
just would I would have enjoyed that. I really liked that addition to Ragnarok.
Oh, it was great. It was
Have a
great.
great song, yeah. So like, if he had shown up with Rocket and Groot to a little bit of Zeppelin, that would have been just icing on the cake for me.
Yeah. Well, and that
Um,
that whole interaction of is one of those things where I don't know. I mean, I feel like a lot of the humor that I enjoy is stuff that probably other people are not going to laugh about. Sometimes it's like subtle political stuff and things like that. But I think I probably at least chuckled, if not out laughed, every time Thor called Rocket Rabbit.
yeah.
And and I think he called Groot. I mean, even though he said that they had Groot on Asgard
Yes.
as an elective, I think he called Groot Tree at least once.
I think he did as well. Yeah.
So Rabbit and Tree, I just I
Film Rabbit.
it made me laugh every time.
Yes. Oh man, they had just great chemistry, like those characters, which is a weird thing to say since two of them aren't people.
Aren't
But
people? Yeah, I forget. Like I saw a thing of Bradley Cooper in the studio recording Rabbit's voice, and I had just like completely got forgotten.
you
Like,
called him Rabbit.
oh yeah, okay, nice, nice. It stuck with me.
But hey,
Um,
it's good. It's good.
he was in there recording Rocket's voice, and I had forgotten, like, oh yeah, Bradley Cooper is Rocket.
Yeah.
Like you just never see him. Like, somehow I remembered a little bit better that Vin Diesel was Groot, because like because Groot's kind of in the first film this big hulking guy who
Right.
who only has one line, which is basically Vin Diesel in
Yeah.
in every character that he plays. So
Hmm.
but of course with Bradley Cooper and Rocket, there's a little bit more of a difference there. So I'd like, oh yeah, I'd completely forgotten that Bradley Cooper was part of the MCU.
Yeah. 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 That was Yeah. The more I think about it, I really do enjoy that team up. It's it was really entertaining
Yeah.
seeing that three come together.
Well, so I guess kind of to wrap things up here, what's your kind of just overall takeaway heading out of this movie? And um, we've got, I guess, right at a year to wait for Avengers 4 because I think it comes out, which they could move it up or move it back, but I think right now it's scheduled to come out like the first or I think the first week of May, first or second week of May. So we're literally right at 1 year. So you know we're now going into like the last movie of I guess a certain phase of Marvel to where
to like their first generation almost.
Yeah, their first generation because they've had phase 1, phase 2, phase 3. So I guess we'll go from phase 3 to phase 4, but this is more of an ending because we know that at least for a while, if not permanently, this is going to be the end for a lot of these characters that really have kind of kicked it off.
Yeah, man. Well, I think just going back to my first point, like you just have to, all the Disney of it all aside, like just recognize like what an achievement this is, like, and one of the reasons why this was so successful, and this goes back to the whole DC, conversation we had, they took time to have like one, like spearheaded, like one guy, Feige having this vision. He allowed people some interpretation as long as it stayed within the reins of that, and they stayed really like I don't know if I would say I feel it's irresponsible of me to say they stayed true to the characters because I'm not entirely familiar with the comic characters, but it felt like they did. But whatever character they established for them, they stayed true to all the way through this.
Right.
Like I never once, I could be wrong, but I can't think of any. Nothing sticks out. I never once have thought of a big Marvel character doing something that was out of line with their personality ever.
Right.
I mean, Star-Lord screwed up their whole plan, to when it looked like they were going to capture Thanos, but like, of course he would.
Right.
He's this insecure alpha male wannabe and just found out the girl that he loves the most is dead because of him. Like, why wouldn't he let his temper get the best of him?
Right.
So, yeah. So just recognize the achievement. See it twice if you can, because it's a lot more fun the second time when you're not stressed out about who's going to die. And I would also, I for what it's worth, I don't know if this was intentional or not. I'm going to pretend like it was just so I can give them more credit. I think it was a stroke of genius to schedule Ant-Man and Wasp after this. Yeah. Because if you still want to watch a Marvel film and not feel like the world is ending or, you're losing, like I just watched their most recent trailer earlier this week and I was like, man, I forgot how funny that franchise is. Like, that'll be a nice reprieve from all this darkness and death that now Marvel also does better than DC. So, what are you going to do?
Yeah. I've still got to see the first Ant-Man. I've still never seen the first Ant-Man.
It's you know what, it's worthy. I mean, it's not, it's never going to be an Avengers film, but it holds up. It's a standalone film, it's a wrapped up story, so it's fun. It's a fun little heist movie.
Yeah. Cool. Well, I mean, I think for me, we talked about some of our other friends have had different takes on it, and one of our friends was talking about, maybe being done with the MCU after this and really kind of wanting to see those movies die so that new material could come along and replace it. I think I've got a different take on that. I just, nostalgia is just so strong that if it's not Marvel, if it's not superheroes, it's just going to be something else. So I can be okay with Marvel being out there and being what's dominant at the box office. It's kind of, even if you think of it as sort of cinematic candy and you want to be overly critical of it, it's almost kind of like, you know, like people will swear off like candy or something like that, have none of it in their diet, and that's fine if you want to do that. But like you can have, you know, like 5% of your diet be candy or whatever, and it's just going to be fine. And so I guess I kind of take the same approach with cinema, to where not everything has to be Academy Award winning level quality entertainment. There's times where I just want to and go in knowing that the good guys are going to win.
Yeah.
Even if, you know, and it's funny, it's kind of funny to say that coming off coming off the heels of Infinity War, where they didn't, but in the end, I think they will. So,
Yeah.
you know, Marvel movies, unless something dramatically changes, they're still going to be tremendously popular. I don't know exactly. You know, I think the next phase is probably going to be, of course, you know, just focused more on Spider-Man, Black Panther, Doctor Strange, Captain Marvel's coming in, and I'm sure some other characters. I think going back to the whole thing with Bucky and Steve, that would be, I think, a huge consolation prize, even more than a consolation prize, really. Like if Captain America making some sacrifice and going away is what it takes to get like a Bucky and Falcon team up movie, like I'm okay with that, because I don't
Yeah.
really know where else they can go with that character, and I think there's a ton of stuff that they can do with those two. So so you know, Marvel's going to be fine in the short term. I'm sure out of all these characters and some more that they'll introduce, they'll form a new Avengers group or something like that. So,
Yeah.
um, and then of course we've talked about the fact that, you know, by purchasing Fox, they're going to have the rights to X-Men coming over, and eventually, I don't know if it's going to take 5, maybe closer to 10 years to really get that franchise off the ground the way they want to do it, but eventually they're going to start making X-Men movies, and I'm curious to see, you know, I want to see them give X-Men the treatment that they've given a lot of these other franchises, because even though we've gotten some great sort of contained stories from what Fox did with X-Men, you know, from Logan to X-Men 2 to I liked a couple of the films in the reboot, the 60s, 70s, 80s reboot.
Yeah.
Um, but at the same time, it's been hit or miss, and probably 2/3 of the X-Men movies have been crappy if you start counting the Wolverine sequels, because
Right.
those, most of those were pretty bad. So
Yeah.
I would like to see Marvel, you know, just deliver a consistent, cohesive X-Men universe, but still keeping into you know, taking into account like, oh, you know, Logan was really successful with what they did with that. Deadpool is really successful. Like, you know, they don't have to take everything in and um, you know, sanitize it into a Disney package. So
Right.
hopefully they won't do that. But yeah, you know, I haven't seen Ant-Man. I don't think I've seen Iron Man 2 or 3 all the way through. I've seen bits and pieces of them.
Yeah.
I only recently saw most of Thor: The Dark World. So, you know, I'm not someone who's got to see every Marvel movie. But lately, you know, I think at the beginning and then now lately they've put out some really pretty good stuff that when I was a kid, or you know, even a little over 10 years ago, would have been hard to imagine us getting this level of quality of superhero movies after you'd seen the Batman films,
Yeah.
and they're the not the Nolan Batman films, but the
Burton or
Val,
Schumacher.
yeah, the Val Kilmer / George Clooney Batman movie. So so like I said, I think there's a place for it, and I'm not going to see every Marvel movie, but I'm glad it's out there, and I think to a certain extent, you know, even though the stakes may be lower and they may be overly idealistic. I think even just from the standpoint of, giving some sort of role models for kids. I mean, now I'm like really getting off on a side rant here, but
Nah, I'm still with you.
I mean, we definitely aren't getting role models from politicians. Celebrities are not what you want for your role models. Professional athletes more and more do not want that responsibility. And not every kid has parents at home who are going to be good role models for them. So, if it comes from overly idealistic Marvel movies, like, I don't think that's such a bad thing.
Yeah. Um, the more I think about it, I don't think nostalgia is the problem. And I think we'll touch on this later on next time we talk. But um, nostalgia is not the problem. The quality of the content is the problem. Like,
Yeah.
you hit on it with those X-Men films, and like, I don't have a problem with them making Marvel films forever as long as they maintain the quality of what they're putting out. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, why should we have to stop if they keep making something that's good?
Mm-hmm.
Like, like we could just stop making superhero movies and go to back to, I don't know, doing something else, like there being a new trend. Well, like every trend has like a ton of crappy ones, and then the top tier of what they do, whether that's action films or dramas or World War II films or indie films, like, for every Little Miss Sunshine, there's a The Room,
Right.
like it's just so, like, I don't think labeling the genre is the issue, or even labeling the appeal to nostalgia is the issue either, because like you said, like, I mean, if we thought when we were kids, like, you tell me I was going to care about like Captain America and Iron Man, like, those were not the cartoons that I watched,
Right.
and
Yeah, and for what's happening now, like, I really kind of, that wasn't really like the best comparison for me to use. I think going forward, like, why we'll see these characters resurrected over and over. But you're right. I mean, for like why it's successful right now, it's not nostalgia for this like it is for something like what we're probably going to talk about next time with the Cobra Kai series on YouTube Red. So yeah, for MCU, it's nostalgia is not the issue right now.
yeah. So, I mean, I think if they can keep telling compelling stories, I mean, they have every right to keep going. And, financially, they're only trending upward right
Mm,
now with
yeah.
with their last two films are cracking $1 billion each. So it's not going to stop, not
Right.
anytime soon.
Yeah. Yeah. Well,
So,
like you pointed out, when when they can make more money with one weekend of Avengers Infinity War than Justice League's entire run.
poor Justice League. They try so hard.
Right. There's
Um,
there's got to be now that I think about it, like, I got to find somewhere on the internet. There's probably some GIF or drawing, or probably multiple versions of this, of like Thanos just like beating up the Justice League.
Well, it's funny you should mention that, because I think it was Screen Rant, that website, but their like thumbnail or whatever the proper term is for the article announcing that Infinity War had beaten was the shot of him, about ready to throw the moon, you
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
but instead of the moon, it's just this giant bag of cash. It's just like just ripping a giant bag of cash out of the sky. And
Nice.
I'm like, oh gosh, it's great. Yeah. Poor Justice League. I wanted them to succeed so much. I mean, not really under the guise of what they had created, but I
Yeah.
do want to see those characters done right. Who knows? Maybe they'll be driven into the ground and Disney will buy them eventually too.
Yeah, we talked about that the other day. Like, that would just be the funniest thing to me, would just be if the end game was Warner Brothers figures out, like, we can't make this work. Like, it's just going to make more sense for us to sell it to Disney, which I don't even know if that would be possible if like DC has something in their contract that you
Yeah,
know,
they can't be with
it
Marvel.
can't be with Marvel or something, but I think it'd be hilarious if it was.
It would be really funny is if they lasted enough time, like let's say the MCU ends and more years pass and they eventually buy them,
Mhm.
and then they just like restart the MCU as the DCU, their Wonder Woman film is essentially is effectively the first Captain America film.
Right.
Their Batman origin film is really Iron Man, and it's like the exact same premises for all of
Mhm.
them.
Yeah.
That would as an old man, I would find that hilarious because like our children would be like, older and be like, oh, these are so awesome, and I'm like, we did this like 20 years ago, man. Like,
Yeah.
I'm telling you exactly what's gonna happen. That guy, Dark Side, he's gonna wipe out half of humanity. Just don't, just you watch.
Right. Well, and we mentioned the other day too, like I don't remember Cable's full line, but the best part from the Deadpool 2 trailer and what
Yeah,
what sold us both, which I was going to go see it anyway, but what sold us both was like, yeah, we got to be there opening weekend, was where Cable's like, in Deadpool's ear, just, you're not a man, you're just a clown dressed up as a blah blah blah. And Ryan Reynolds is all, so dark. Are you sure you're not from the DC universe?
oh man,
Oh my gosh.
that is that is such an effective franchise that is doing its thing. I
It
mean,
is.
it's I
Yeah.
respect that too. Like I don't particularly care for Deadpool as a character standalone, but again, respect. Like I just respect what they've done. Like
Mhm.
so I'm interested to see that. I don't know when I'll get around to it, but I'll be looking for an opportunity to see it at some point down the
Right.
road. But
Yep.
it looks good. But yeah, that moment, yeah, it was before the second time I saw Infinity War. They had played that trailer, and I was like, okay, all right, I'm with you. I'm with
Yeah.
you. You got me.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. All right. Well, I think that about wraps it up for this time. And yeah, we'll come back early next week and talk about Cobra Kai. So
All right.
that will be a very nostalgia driven discussion.
Yes, indeed.
Yeah.
Yes, indeed.
All right, Stephen. Thanks for joining me. And
Thanks for having me.
we'll see you early next week.
All right, man. Take care.